Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another short little unboxing video to share with you guys. I purchased this from my own personal collection off of Recon 1. I said a while back that this specific model, which if you're not familiar with the logo, is a Shirogorov knife. This particular model is one that I was interested in buying more versions of. And it's been a long time since I've seen one that I really wanted, but this was the case, and it was substantially less expensive than the other versions or just Shirogorov knives in general. So I was actually really excited about this one. I'm going to share it with you guys. I'm going to compare it with my other two models. Thanks so much to my patrons for supporting me. Let's go ahead and find out what we've got here. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm going to rob you of the authentic unboxing experience, the authentic Metal Complex unboxing experience, which is a blind unboxing. I have already been in this box. I do not record content on the weekends. All of my content's pre-recorded, but this came in on a weekend. So I've already been in it, but I still want to share it with you guys. I was surprised. I kind of had my assumptions that it was different than my other two substantially, and it is a little bit, but we'll take a look. We'll go ahead and take a look. Let's get it out of here. Obviously, it's rewrapped by me, so that's not how it looks from Shirogorov. This is an F3 with an Elmax blade and emerald alatex, or it's kind of like a sea green carbon fiber, which is really cool. And then it's on multi-row bearings. Let's go ahead and open this up. I think that this looks absolutely stunning. Sometimes carbon fiber, and by the way, yes, this is textured. Sometimes carbon fiber that's colored looks disgusting to me. And if you're not a big fan of this color, that's okay. But this texturing and the way that this is woven, like the alatex weave, I guess, the fact that it's contoured just gives it this absolutely beautiful, like hyper three-dimensional look. The way that the light bounces off it, I just think it's fantastic. They also had a blue one. This is interesting. On camera, it looks much more blue. In real life, I would say it's a couple more shades towards the green side. So my camera doesn't really know what to do with this, but it definitely is more of an aqua on camera, and it's much closer to emerald. Not quite emerald, but it's closer to emerald in real life. Still definitely a blue-green, but really cool. Let's go ahead and deploy it. The action on this is absolutely spectacular, really smooth. I mean, I've maybe deployed this 10 times since I got it. Really nice. It's got a little pivot collar here. We have the typical Shirogorov screws. We have a different backspacer here, but definitely really nice. We've got a nice pocket clip that I think is identical to the other ones. We have an Elmax blade, and if you're wondering, is it thinner? Yes. One of the interesting details here, there's a couple of things that I want to talk about as far as this knife versus the other F3 models, and Shirogorov knives in general. But if you don't know, I have continuously said that the F3 is one of the best knife designs ever. Now, people get up in arms when I say that, but just understand, I'm not saying it's the best dollar-for-dollar knife in existence. I'm saying as far as a pocket knife or folding knife design, right, in terms of the blade profile, the blade geometry, the ergonomics, the ease of manipulation, all these little tiny things that go into making a very simple utilitarian cutting tool, right? The downside to a Shirogorov knife is that they're horrifically expensive. It's ironically expensive, right? For how good they are in terms of cutting tools, right? But obviously the difference here, there's a difference in steel. I've got another version of this that is in M390. That was the first one that I purchased. And then I have yet another version of it, a special edition version that is in Vanax. This one is significantly more expensive, but it was like a special run. So real quick, I want to get a measurement of this guy and just up against these other two F3, like the full-on F3, because this is technically not like a full-on F3. They call it an F3, but it's just like it's like a lesser version, which is funny, I think. I want to point out what I think is so spectacular about this one versus the other two that are so much more expensive, and why ultimately I think this is a far better deal. But we're going to dig into that a little bit more here. The first thing I need to do is find that, confound it, there it is, the tape measure, which is always gone. The overall length of this guy, 8.75 inches with a 4-inch blade. I think website's listed as 3.9. I'm getting 4 inches of cutting edge as well. Is it exactly the same for the other two? 8.75 inches, 4-inch blade. 8.75 inches with a 4-inch blade. Same with the cutting edge. It's the same. This is the same deal. Now, the pivot on this version is, I guess, a little bit smaller. Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you, though. The smaller pivot with the pivot collar looks better. Absolutely. How's this area here? Well, it's identical outside of the blade stock thickness. How do each of these, now again, you know, I got to point this out. Cutting a piece of paper doesn't really prove much, but I'm going to tell you how the factory edge feels versus the standard F3. Pretty good, right? And then this guy. Honestly, they feel about the same. Yeah, that one slices well. This one slices well. They feel almost identical, despite this one being thicker. So I suppose you might notice the difference in terms of slicing performance when you're cutting through something that's denser or thicker, right? But probably not by much. I want to actually compare the blade stock thickness between these two. You know, in terms of performance of a pocket knife, right? I suppose there's arguments to be made when you're doing something that's more on the abusive side for a thicker blade stock. But generally speaking, a thinner blade stock, like with the same blade profile, should result in a thinner cutting edge. So this guy's 155 thousandths. And then this guy, this lesser version of the F3, and again, big asterisks on that. This is much thinner at 130 thousandths. How's the balance? So on this version, which should be further back from the pivot because of the less material in the blade, you're a little bit, but you're still right in the middle of that primary position. Honestly, the balance feels pretty good there. This guy, ever so slightly more forward. I mean, a trivial, if nothing. Like, that's bizarre, right? This guy, does it have titanium liners? Well, it would be shocking to me if it had steel, because that'd throw the balance off. Yeah, it's still titanium. Let's take a look at the inside of this guy here real quick. All of this stuff I saved. I didn't actually look. I wanted to save it so that I could enjoy entertaining my own curiosities on camera. This has a steel lock bar insert. They did not cheap out on that, right? That's a titanium lock bar with a steel lock bar insert. Same thing. The jimping on the F3, I've always complained about because it's essentially decorative. This is so stupid. It doesn't do anything. The jimping on this version, slightly less useless. Slightly. I get slightly more traction on the less expensive one. Shirogorov! What is the problem here? Like, you guys have, let's get out this F95. This is the same thing. This is just useless jimping on this guy. We have the, that was the lesser F95 or the F95L or whatever they call it. Same thing on the full-size F95. Is this the Zero or the, whatever. Useless jimping. I have a Shirogorov that's a Tom Mayo that has slightly better. I just don't understand, like, what their issue is with, like, providing jimping that's not really doing anything. But, okay. Not the worst thing in the whole world, right? So additional differences here. The grind itself, this has a little bit of a drop right here, right where the swedge meets. There's a little bit of a noticeable drop there, whereas this one's more of just like a continuous, right? Same thing with the Elmax guy. The Elmax guy is literally the same thing. It's just got aqua technocarbo instead of the bronze carbon fiber. This actually does have bronze flake in it. It's just incredibly subtle, has a bronze clip. These two are identical, as far as I know, like identical outside of the fact that one is in Elmax, right? And then, well, this has a little teeny tiny pivot collar, right? Which I do think is a nice little detail, but everything else is essentially the same. The finish, almost identical, maybe a slightly more reflective on this guy. This guy, the two finishes, right? Definitely a little bit of a nicer finish on this guy versus this guy, but not something that's like, oh my gosh, it's the biggest deal in the whole world. This has more of like a noticeable scratchy tumble on it, which is fine, right? It's just a little bit cleaner, not anything insane. But I gotta say, like, looking at these two, like, right here, I would automatically assume, I'd be like, oh, obviously this is like a special edition version. That must be much more expensive, right? No. The action, the detent is absolutely identical. the action. This is the one, the one that I've had for, I think, a couple years now. That's been deployed way more. Identical, but this one's actually slightly smoother. Now, the special edition one is really smooth. This one is definitely a little smoother than this guy, but I have a feeling, I mean, all Shirogorovs are going to break in. This is still multi-row bearings, right? Centering on both of these is really, really good. Back here, we've got a frag on the backspacer, which is okay. I think this one actually looks better. It's not like it's like dramatically more or less detailed. It's essentially the same thing. Screws down here, I guess maybe on this one, they're a little bigger. Is the pocket clip the same? The pocket clip screws a little bigger. Okay, so Elmax versus M390. Yeah, M390 is going to be slightly more expensive than Elmax, like to buy it. But in terms of performance, like M390, assuming that it's optimally heat treated, will have better edge retention and better corrosion resistance. But Elmax is probably the better user steel overall. In my opinion, it's going to have a better balance of toughness and still be stainless and still have excellent edge retention, but it'll be friendlier to touch up. My vote, honestly, I mean, unless you side 100% with the benefits of, edge retention, my vote would be on Elmax. And but the steel that I like even more is Vanax. And Vanax won't hold an edge as long as either. It has a composition that's balanced more similarly to MagnaCut, which is a steel that is actually made for pocket knives, versus Elmax and M390 having other primary applications, if you didn't know that. The reason I'm talking about all this is because this guy, like if we're talking about the price of the first one, I think I paid like $900. It was like $850 to $900. This was way more because special edition, right? Whatever. That doesn't mean anything to anybody unless they're a collector. This guy, still incredibly pricey, but a much better deal at $750. Now, this is only exciting to a small percentage of people. Number one, people who are interested in Shirogorov knives. And number two, people who are actually willing to spend that kind of money on a folding knife, which is not everybody. But if you're familiar with my channel, over the last 4,500 uploads, this is not going to be any type of shock to you. This will only be a shock to you if you stumbled into my channel off of TikTok or YouTube Shorts, which is happening fairly regularly. So welcome, right? But welcome to the knife world. Knives are expensive. They can get really expensive. They have been that way for decades, right? This is not a new thing. But as far as Shirogorov knives go, even looking back over the last 10 years, $750 is a pretty decent price tag. I'm actually really, really impressed with this. I think that this is probably the most impressive Shirogorov knife, dollar for dollar, that I've seen. And I absolutely love the Alatex scales. I hope that they do more with that. I'd love to see purple and red and all that stuff. I mean, I would be really, really interested. So I think that a lot of the changes are actually kind of upgrades over this guy, right? The comfort is identical. Neither one feels, honestly, like this guy feels a little more grippy because of the texturing, but it's not super aggressive. It might be slightly more difficult to get in and out of your pocket because of the texturing. You would think that the thinner blade geometry would imply a better cutting edge, and it probably depends on what you're cutting. I would prefer Elmax over M390, but some people just absolutely have to have whatever they perceive to be, the best steel for the options when they're spending that much money. I don't think M390 is going to justify an additional, if it's, if we're talking between 700, maybe this was 800 or 800. I feel like it was 850. I can't remember exactly what I paid. Nowadays in 2024, if they release exactly this, it's probably going to be closer to $900, right? So let's say there's like $100 to $150 difference between this guy and this guy. I feel like this is a whatever like lesser version of the F3 this is, it just makes way more sense, right? Now, on the topic of, are Shirogorov knives really worth that much money? If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would have said absolutely, based on what was comparable at that price point. Now we have many competitors to Shirogorov, right? Shirogorov knives, the custom knives, are definitely made in Russia, right? And you got your feelings about that. with Russian, whatever. I'm going to focus on the knife part of it, okay? The custom stuff is definitely made there. This production stuff, is it entirely made there? I don't know. As the years go on, you know, I'm not sure. I would venture to guess that there's a certain percentage of it that is not made in Russia. So where would it be made? Well, probably where we all assume that it's made. The problem is that we don't know. So if you compare some other brands, like especially like your U.S. companies that are in that territory, your Oz Machine Company, your Brown Knives, your Koenig Knives, especially Holt Knives, right? You want to look at like Hog House, not in the USA, or Herman Knives. These are super, like, incredible competitors. But as far as I know, those companies don't have any machining done anywhere else. So is this a better deal than the other Shirogorov knives that I have handled, right? I've paid for all of them. Yes. Are these knives actually worth as much as we've been paying? I assumed that, I've always said that I felt like all Shirogorov knives were a little overpriced, even assuming everything was done in Russia, but I'm not 100% certain of that. So yeah, I think Shirogorov knives, despite being somebody who very much loves Shirogorov knives and collects them, and I think they're very, very premium, there is something special about them. They do feel a lot better than something like, let's say, like if we were comparing something super nice that was manufactured entirely in China. There is something about these knives that feels like a little extra magic-y, a little extra saucy, right? Can't really put my finger on it. Yeah, they've been overpriced, and I think now, like especially in today's market, I think they're significantly overpriced, right? So if you're going to pick up a Shirogorov knife, I would recommend that you steer clear of anything that's well over $800 if you're trying to get the best bang for your buck. If you're like me and you can't help yourself sometimes, I get it, because I do that on a regular basis. But I run a knife channel that allows me to do that, right? So a lot of the rules that I'm playing by are not the rules I'm playing by, but the funding for this stuff is part of the channel budget, right? So if you're just looking to add something to your collection, I don't think a lot of these Shirogorov knives, well, they're definitely not going to, most of them are not going to hold value if you're into the, like, investing in the knife collection stuff. But to narrow it down to a simple point here, this is probably one of the most impressive dollar-for-dollar Shirogorovs I've ever handled. I think the F3 in general is just really, really impressive. I prefer it over the F95. I love both of my F95 models, but I just think this is so much more impressive for less money. So if you're going to go for it, I would check out these special F3, these lesser F3 models. I picked this up from Recon 1. It's really cool. Does it warrant its own review? I think maybe. A lot of what I covered here today is essentially that, because I'm very, very familiar with this model in terms of just how it feels design-wise. Yeah, this is, the reason I keep dancing around, like, when I keep saying lesser version is because they literally just label it as F3. It's just a thinner F3 in Elmax with hardware that's a little smaller, but has a really beautiful scale material, right? There's no less quality going into it. It's got a little bit less of a finish, right? But does a slightly shinier finish, the addition of M390, a thicker blade, and slightly larger hardware equate to $150 more? I don't think so. But I don't know. It's really hard to say, right? I really like this. I'm going to add it to my collection, right? Which is just for me to enjoy. But that's, yeah, I think these versions of the F3 are probably my favorites. I really wish that it had slightly better jimping, but I do really like this. That texturing is very satisfying. You can kind of see, not super deep, but definitely enough to feel it. That's just really, really nice. It looks like somebody tossed a bunch of emeralds and sapphires into, like, super clear beach water. Like, that's what it makes me think of. So, I don't know. Let me hear your thoughts. The Shirogorov model labeling system is very confusing to me and to many people. I'm sure that there are people in my audience who are much more familiar with it, and maybe you can give us all some pointers. But that's really going to be it for today. So, very cool. Definitely overpriced. That's going to be it. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.